So we went through the board activities to talk about the trickle-down effect. And now we're going to do this with the properties of quadrilateral. The quadrilaterals also, all the properties trickle down. Okay? So if you look at the parallelograms, notice how for the rectangle, see how they're connected by the line? Notice the rectangle says parallelogram properties plus. Does everyone see how the parallelogram properties will trickle down to everything underneath it? Does that make sense? Also, it's true for the rhombus. So see where rhombus is the parallelogram properties plus. And then for the square, notice the square says both the rectangle and the rhombus, because those are what are above it. Does that make sense? So we're going to trickle down. You guys should have notes that have 5 properties of parallelograms. Can everybody get those out? And we're going to fill out this sheet. So this sheet's going to organize all of our stuff in one place, okay? It's like that cheat sheet I gave you for the parallel lines. Remember that had the 4 different spots for things? It's going to be the same thing. It's going to get everything in one place. Mackenzie, do you have number 1? What is it? Yeah, so opposite sides are parallel. Please feel free to abbreviate, okay? It's going to be a little tight in there, so you may have to abbreviate. If you don't know what my abbreviations mean, then go ahead and write out the whole thing. You just have to write a little small. So it says opposite sides are, this is the symbol for parallel. So if you want to write out parallel, go ahead and do it. Opposite sides are parallel. Number 2, do we have a property? What is it? Opposite sides are congruent. Remember, that's my symbol for congruent. Opposite sides are congruent. Once again, if you want to write it out, be sure to do it, okay? Number 3, property 3. I need somebody else to talk. You've been doing great. Who's got property number 3 for me? Come on, y'all. Mochi. Opposite angles are congruent. Very good. So that's my little symbol for angles. Opposite angles are congruent. Property number 4. Anybody got 4? Gustavo. Consecutive. What does that word mean, consecutive, Gustavo? No, you're thinking complementary. Consecutive. If Ryan, Mackenzie, and Cindy are consecutive, what does that mean? Next 2 are in a row. So consecutive angles, which means angles that are next to each other, are supplementary. Gustavo, for a chance of redemption, what does supplementary mean? They add up to 180. Very good. And what's my last property, Jasmine? Diagonals bisect each other. Okay, diagonals bisect each other. So we've talked about those properties already. We did those, okay? What's new now, can I move on? What's new is these guys. So notice, trickle-down effect. Parallelogram properties plus. So are the 5 that we just did, are they still true for the rectangle? Yes. Yes. So they're trickling down, okay? But there are 2 new ones. First, the definition of a rectangle. The definition of a rectangle, it has 4 what? 4 right angles. So a rectangle has 4 right angles. 4 right angles. And the other thing that's new about it is that the diagonals are congruent. The diagonals are congruent. I'm going to draw a picture of that so you can see it in a second. The diagonals are congruent. Plus, how many from above? How many other properties? 5. For a total of how many does it have total? 5 plus 2 more, so it has 7. Okay? The diagonals are congruent. Looks like this. Draw a rectangle. Draw your diagonals. There's one diagonal that's not really well drawn. There's your other diagonals. What it's saying is that the whole blue line, the entire thing, is congruent to the entire green line. Okay? Earlier we had that they bisected each other, so that they were half, right? One half equaled the other half. Now we're talking about the whole thing. So the entire blue line is congruent to the entire green line. Okay? So those are the two new ones for rectangles. Any questions with that? We have 3 for the rhombus. What was the definition of a rhombus? It has 4 what? 4 congruent sides. Good. 4 congruent sides. So that's the definition. And now we have 2 new ones. 2 new ones. The first one is the diagonals are perpendicular. And the symbol for perpendicular is that upside down T. Have you seen that before? So the diagonals are perpendicular. If you wanted to abbreviate, you're welcome to. Upside down T. I'll draw a picture of this one. So if I have a rhombus, remember a rhombus is just, it looks like a diamond. So it could be tilted if you wanted. Remember I showed you the example of the Sims guy? Has the skinny diamond on top. If I draw the diagonals, here's one, here's the other. If I draw it well, you can see that they make a 90-degree angle in there. Kind of nice, right? Everybody see how that 90-degree angle, where they intersect? Yep. Any questions on property number 2? And the second property, or the third property, excuse me, diagonals bisect. What does bisect mean? Cut it into 2 equal parts. So you're going to cut it in half and then they're going to both going to be equal. So the diagonals bisect opposite angles. Diagonals bisect opposite angles. So I'm going to draw another rhombus. This one's going to get a bit confusing. There's a lot of stuff to this one. Draw another rhombus. Draw the diagonals. Okay. Are the diagonals still perpendicular? Yeah, because that's one of my properties. They're always going to be perpendicular. And the opposite angles, it cuts them into half. So that means that this angle is congruent to that angle. You see how it cuts it in half? And on the other side, this angle will be congruent to that angle. Do you see how it cuts it in half? So see how the line comes in here and splits this angle into 2 equal parts, the top and the bottom? It's also true for the other side. That piece, we all look up, will be equal to the other half. Does that make sense? And then it bisects it on the last corner as well. Everybody see how those are all bisected? Those are all the properties. So the square is going to have, look at the square. It's going to have all the properties from the parallelogram, because it's above it. It's going to have all the properties of the rectangle, and it's going to have all the properties of the rhombus. Does that make sense? So the square is the most specific type. Okay? Any questions on this little diagram? We are going to fill out the kites and the trapezoids at a later date. So please keep this. We're going to fill out the kites and the trapezoids at a later date. What we're going to do now is create a little, we're going to do the same thing we did yesterday, where we're going to cut them out and paste them in their correct places. However, now we're going to do it with properties. So here are your shapes, okay? Just like your sheets. What I'm going to have to do is in groups of like 3-ish. Here are all the properties. They're all scrambled up though. So your job is to cut them out and to paste them under the right shape. Notice that I've given you how many each one should have underneath it when it's finished. So if you notice your parallelogram had 5, so it should have 5 underneath it when you're done. Does that make sense? The square inherits all the stuff. So even though it's repeated for all these, I want you to post it in every place. So for example, if you look at both pairs of opposite sides of parallel, the number 1 under parallelogram, I want that to be true for all of them, so I want you to paste it in each location. Does that make sense? So we're going to use the trickle down effect here. So please, we have class ends at 45, so we've got 20 minutes to do this. Once again, one person grab one sheet of each, glue stick and some scissors, and let's get started, okay? I'll walk around to help you. Go ahead.